right, everybody. Welcome in to another episode of the NFL Seekers podcast. Today, we're going to be predicting and deep diving into the AFC South. We'll be talking about each team's offseason starting lineups. We'll each predict each team's record. The winner of the division will give out division award as well. Four young up-and-coming gunslingers in this division. Some great up-and-coming quarterbacks, superstar potential. Really excited to talk about the AFC South. How are you, Josh?
Doing good. We are now 5 weeks away from week one of the NFL season. So the dog days of summer are dwindling down. I think we got the Hall of Fame game that's almost here, which is like the very start. A lot of exciting things. We're getting almost to the end of summer. It's kind of, it's hot, but it's starting to get that like fallish vibe. Football feels like it's back. We're in the start of mini camp. But yeah, this is going to be a fun division to talk about. I just call it, this is just the ultra young, exciting division with Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, Trevor Lawrence, and CJ Stroud. So it's just a bunch of young, talented quarterbacks all duking it out for the title.
Absolutely. It's pretty crazy that preseason's this week. It doesn't even feel real, honestly. But yeah, it starts this week. We'll see some football. No idea who will actually be on the field. But yeah, the Texans will be playing the Bears. So that will be really, really fun. Speaking of the AFC South, let's just get right into the Titans, the Tennessee Titans, who finished 6-11 last year in 2023. Don't even really need to talk about 2023 because it's just such a different team. They lost a legend in Derrick Henry. They added just about every single veteran on the market. Let's just go right to their offseason because it was almost comical how active they were this offseason. They were moving like a Super Bowl contender, adding a bunch of really solid veterans. Definitely safe to say this team got better for sure. They're really building around Will Levis and making sure they have a proper evaluation of Will Levis. So let's just go into this team's offseason. We can start it off with the losses, honestly, because you do lose a team legend and Derrick Henry. He's been a Titan for so long. It's going to be so odd seeing him in a Ravens jersey. So that is a little bit tough losing out on him. You lose Azeez Al-Shaair to the interdivision Texans, but kind of hurts. But you do draft a linebacker that I really like. We'll talk about that. But going on to the additions, you add Calvin Ridley, big money signing over from Jacksonville, another division rival, staying in division down season for Ridley to say the least, but it's pretty fun. He comes in with Tyler Boyd to create a pretty fun receiver trio with DeAndre Hopkins, very good veteran proven receivers for Will Levis. So I like that, building that chemistry for Will Levis. And then they trade for L'Jarius Sneed, probably the best corner on the market of the offseason. I really, really love that move. We love Sneed. He was awesome last year, maybe the best corner last year. And then they also bring in Chido Awuzie opposite of him. I think that's really fun. They're really building up that secondary with some solid veterans. And then you bring in Lloyd Cushenberry, who I personally thought was a top 5, top 10 center in the NFL last year. Great free agent signing. So I really love that addition. You bring in Tony Pollard, Jamal Adams. Like this team was just moving mad, really, just bringing in some really solid veteran pieces. It was fun.
Tyler Boyd, they go and give Kenneth Murray a bag for whatever reason. That was the one. It was a very big head scratcher. Not sure why he got paid, but he did. But yeah, like you said, very active, completely different team. You obviously swap head coaches from Mike Vrabel, who's an absolute legend, to Brian Callahan. But I think it was time for a change in Tennessee, and I think that'll ultimately benefit them. I really like Brian Callahan. He brings over a good staff with him. His dad, the absolute offensive lineman legend coach. So, the identity is going to change a little bit, which should be interesting. But yeah, losing Vrabel and Derrick Henry is obviously is weird. It's going to be weird in Tennessee next season just because those two are gone. But definitely very active. And they're giving Will Levis weapons. You bring in a lot of weapons. You go pay Lloyd Cushenberry the biggest center contract in NFL history. You give Calvin Ridley an absolute bag. You bring in Tony Pollard to pair with brain
Like
fart.
Tyjae Spears, the electric man.
Yes, big Tajay Spears, which would be an interesting duo because they're very similar. But yeah, it's kind of a crazy offseason. They're definitely one of the most active teams in the NFL, if not the most active.
Absolutely. And with that, let's just go into the roster portion. You just mentioned Tajay Spears, and it gets me excited. We can start with the backfield because, yeah, it was an interesting addition. We were both a little bit confused bringing in Pollard just because him and Tajay Spears are kind of similar type of, players. They kind of succeed in the same areas, both really solid receiving backs. So it will be interesting to see, going from Derrick Henry, just that ground and pound, smash mouth running style to a more zone receiving heavy running backfield. It will be interesting, but you're really giving Will Levis really solid, just proven options on the outside with DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd in the slot, just proven receivers. And I think that's a really smart way to get your young quarterback acclimated into things. I think the offensive line, I do want to shout out the Titans just for attacking the offensive line. Not only do you bring in Bill Callahan, one of the best offensive line coaches ever, who gets the most out of them, but you got a pretty solid starting five now after having arguably the worst offensive line like ever last year. I think JC Latham's just going to be a rock on the left side of their offensive line. I think he's going to be a great pick. They got him pick 7. Your first round pick last year, Peter Skronce, kind of struggled as a rookie, but I was really high on him. I think he's going to have a really good bounce back season next to Latham and Cushenberry, who we absolutely love. And I think Jalen Brunskill was one of the more underrated just players in the NFL last year. He was a really solid guard, a really good run blocker. And then Nicholas Petit-Frere is suspended for 4 games, so you will have to probably start Sadiq Charles or Dylan Radins there, and that's fine. It's just 4 games. But you can see with this PFF grade here, Petit-Frere wasn't the best last year, had a pretty abysmal season. But I actually do like the player. I liked him as a prospect coming out of Ohio State. So I do think he'll bounce back. So I do like this offense. I think it's fun. I think Chigo Conquo will get his. And I don't know. I think it's pretty fun for Will Levis, and it's a good surrounding cast, especially considering how good of a coach Brian Callahan is.
100%. And I mean, it just gives Will Levis all the tools to be successful for a young quarterback. And I mean, they're just really starting to build around him, which is exciting. But is Tennessee where receivers go to die, Dan?
I mean, eventually these 3 guys are aging, so eventually they will die here for sure. But I think this year they'll be pretty decent. Calvin Ridley wasn't the best last year. I don't think him and Lawrence really meshed well, but I do think he has a little bit of a bounce back season. I think he actually is pretty solid opposite of Hopkins.
Yeah, I mean, and Hopkins, his game is just kind of timeless. He's always going to be solid, and he has that connection with Will Levis. And Tyler Boyd is just always been that really good number 3, and obviously comes from that Bengals offense with Brian Callahan, where he's going to walk into this and be comfortable. And he's just kind of that zone eater, slot receiver. That's a good friend to the quarterback. So I really actually like what they did. And I think they'll be able to be competitive with almost every team in this division.
Yeah, absolutely. You're just bringing comfortability around Will Levis. You're helping him become comfortable with these veterans you're bringing in. Speaking of veterans brought in, let's go to the defense because you really added to this defense. You attacked the defense with a lot of solid veterans. I guess we could start it out with the secondary. You bring in a L'Jarius Sneed via trade, Super Bowl champion, a Cheeto Awuzie, who's been awesome on the outside for the Bengals for a while now. Pretty exciting. You got Roger McCreary in the slot. I think that's going to be really fun. I thought he was one of the more underrated slot corners, and we both really liked him coming out 2 years ago. So I really love the corner trio. I think it's so fun. It's somewhat young as well. Amani Hooker has been a great safety. You bring in Jamal Adams, the aging safety, but I think he's a little bit underrated at this point just because he gets so much hate. I think he can still play as a box safety. You don't really have to worry about him covering because you got 4 good cover players in the secondary, and even like Caleb Farley, Elijah Molden behind him. I think they're going to be pretty solid in that secondary. We both love Jarvis Brownlee, by the way. We compared him to L'Jarius Sneed before the draft, so I think that's really fun. Being the 4th corner here, I do really like the secondary, and then you got Jeffrey Simmons, just an absolute game wrecker on the interior, just an absolute star. He's always going to be a fantastic superstar for this team. Arden Key and Harold Landry on the outside, not as exciting. It'll get the job done, but I did want to show you something kind of funny. Harold Landry's grades from 2018 to 2023 are just like oddly, almost comical consistent. It's just 63, 65, 64, 63, 64. He's been just oddly consistent and nothing, too crazy. Nothing really stands out, but it is just kind of funny. And he is a solid player when healthy. So I do like it. The linebackers are a little bit suspect. Gibbons actually had a great season last year. I don't mind him at all. But I will say Kenneth Murray was pretty abysmal last year, and I do expect the rookie Cedric Gray to take over somewhat soon, but they did pay Murray a bag.
Yes, I really, yeah, like you said, the defense is solid. It's good. It's gonna be a hard nose out there. Um, very interesting prospect. From Texas, Trevondre Sweat, probably the biggest man in the NFL. Adding him along is kind of funny. He went way earlier than what we thought and what we expected, given what happened with his DUI situation just a couple weeks prior to the draft. We thought he could be borderline fifth round. But the Titans obviously said, we don't care. We are going to go with the big man because you cannot teach size. And when he's going to be out there with Trevondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons, that is going to be one of the most lethal interiors in the entire league. I mean, these are just space eating monsters. I mean, Jeffrey Simmons is he's one of the baddest guys in the NFL. That's a bad man. That is one of the scariest defensive players in the NFL, and pairing him with let me pull up Trevondre Sweat's 6'4", 362 pounds next to him is gonna be very fun, and should leave Jeffrey Simmons with some one-on-one opportunities where he can just absolutely eat. So that's gonna be one of my favorite, defensive line duos in the NFL. I think they're going to cause havoc for the foreseeable future. And like you said, Cedric Gray is a really fun linebacker out of North Carolina. Me and you were both very high on him coming out of the draft, and I would not be surprised if he takes over Kenneth Murray's job fairly quick.
Yeah, fairly quick. Murray's coming off a pretty bad, abysmal season, to be honest. But yeah, I think this team's almost contingent on Tavondre Sweat. He really needs to buy in. There is some off the field. Is he fully bought into football? Is he smart? It's a real question, and he will need to buy in. But if he does, that potential is really high on that defensive line. That interior will be scary. He's just a space eater. He'd be a great nose to have next to Simmons to really free up Simmons as a pass rusher. So I do like the defense. I think it's super solid overall. I like the team overall. Anything else you want to say, or do you want to give me your record prediction?
Let's just get into the record prediction. And it's going to be a little bit more tough. It's obviously a team we like, but in a very tough division and with a very brutal schedule. So I'm going to go with 7-10 for the Tennessee Titans is my record prediction, finishing fourth. And that's just, a salute to the other teams just being very talented around them. So it's going to be a tough division. It's going to be a fight. I feel like they might be a year or two out from really competing for the title in this division. But this year it's going to be interesting. The players are just a little odd. I mean, it's fun. They're very active. They went and got big names, but the way they fit together and scheme together, the wide receiver trio, as you had in our notes, is just kind of odd. Hopkins, Boyd, and Ridley. It just feels like they're all on the twilight of their career. It feels like they've all hit their primes and they're slowly falling off. And so it's just a little weird, but definitely a team to keep an eye on. Definitely a team that could be a sleeper and surprise you. But 7-10 feels like the safe bet for me.
Real quick before I give my prediction, do you have any more hope in Traylon Burks, or is it finished with him?
It's tough. Sadly, yeah, as everyone knows on this podcast, I'm a Chargers fan. And I'm pretty much giving all hope up on Quentin Johnston after the first 2 days of practice. So, Traylon Burks has had 2 years already. And I don't know. I mean, I don't see it with him. I haven't seen it with him. I don't see that elite separation. I feel like he was kind of brought up to be like this Debo comparison, which got a lot of people very hyped for him for the draft. And, guilty. I was kind of higher on Traylon Burks too, but the separation just isn't there. There's just not a difference maker. He feels slow in the NFL. And so I don't ever see him being something great. Maybe he can develop into a role player and as a wide receiver three, but it's just not there. It's just not there for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm the same. Before they brought in Tyler Boyd, I would maybe believed in him as the wide receiver three next to these two solid veterans. But as the wide receiver four, I do think it's a pretty much finished, which is a little bit sad. But I agree with you with my prediction as well. I have 7-10, finishing fourth, sadly. But 7-10 is a pretty respectable record in the AFC. That's just a complete gauntlet. Every single AFC team is insane on paper. And the reason we both have them finishing as 7-10 and fourth in the division, let me just read off the first 8 weeks of the season to you. It's just a complete gauntlet. You've got the Bears, Jets, Packers, Dolphins, Colts, Bills, and Lions. That's a pretty crazy first 8 weeks. I don't know if they'll be favored in any of those games, to be honest. Like that's just so sick.
Yeah, no, that is an absolute brutal way to start off the season, brutal schedule. And it's like I said, and every division game is gonna be a fist fight too. So it's gonna be very, very hard for this team. But they do have the talent. I wouldn't be surprised if we're wrong and they win the division because they're a nitty-gritty team. But as of right now, the talent and the coaching and the other teams we're about to talk about, I feel like is just a little bit more superior.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, good transition into our next team, the Indianapolis Colts. They finished 9-8 last year, tied with the Jaguars, but they took third as tiebreakers, so they had the higher draft pick. So we will start with the Colts here. Really fun discussion. Shane Steichen, one of the most underrated, just super great coaches in the NFL. He's always going to have a great offensive game plan. And this whole team, we'll just get it out of the way, is very contingent on Anthony Richardson staying healthy, first of all, and reaching his upside. But he's just got to stay healthy because I'm confident that he will reach that freaky upside that he has. He's just an awesome, awesome football player. And with that, let's go on to the offseason for the Colts. I would say they pretty much stayed the same. Their biggest really addition is Anthony Richardson coming back healthy. It's great seeing him practicing and healthy, and that this team is just straight up contingent on Anthony Richardson reaching that ceiling, because if not, you're going to have a Joe Flacco season, which he had a pretty magical season last year, and I think they could maybe have a playoff push with Flacco, but Anthony Richardson is the true deal breaker with this team. He is Lamar Jackson upside, Jalen Hurts upside with Shane Steichen. He really does. I think he's underrated as a passer. We'll talk about him more in the roster segment, but they're notable offseason additions. It's kind of mostly re-signings. They re-signed Kenny Moore, the star slot corner. He's been really solid for a while now. They re-signed Grover Stewart, just a great run defending, space eating nose tackle. Re-signed Julian Blackman as well in the back end, who we like, and then Michael Pittman, their big guy in the offense. They're great receiver. Already had a pretty good connection with Anthony Richardson to start the season. He's a PPR machine. If you play fantasy, I think that was pretty smart, keeping their players in house and not letting them leave, and really rewarding their players that they drafted and developed. And that really is it. Other than the draft, they had two insane picks, Laiatu Latu and AD Mitchell, who we both loved. They were great steals, crazy steals, honestly. And we'll talk about them in the roster portion. But yeah, this offseason is really just, keeping their own, rewarding their own, and then bringing in Joe Flacco, really maybe the most reliable backup.
Yeah, 100%. Just a good old fashioned in-house, re-signing. And it just kind of reminds me of what Chris Ballard does. He likes to grow and develop his own and pay him. So yeah, Kenny Moore stays, Michael Pittman gets the bag. They re-signed Julian Blackman, who, I know a lot of other teams would have loved to have him. That's kind of an underrated sleeper safety. But yeah, just not nothing too much. And like you said, you pretty much summed it up perfectly. This is reliant on Anthony Richardson's upside and whether he can stay healthy. Because in the 2 games where he was healthy, he was incredible. But we just have a very small sample size of Anthony Richardson. And from a fantasy aspect, he's going high, man. Like, people are thinking he can dethrone Josh Allen because he's got that kind of upside in the, with the run and the pass. Because I mean, dude's got this incredible strong arm. He's a freaky athlete. And so a lot of people are banking on him, from a fantasy aspect, as we will talk about in this show, fantasy. Where do you see Anthony Richardson's value, Dan? And is his ADP way too high, or do you feel comfortable with it right now?
His ADP is scary for sure, considering he didn't finish the game healthy last year. He exited every single game that he
Yeah.
played in last year, which is so insanely frightening. But I do think his
Yeah, did I
ADP,
say he didn't stay healthy for not even 2 games, right?
no, he exited. I think it was, yeah, the 2 games he exited, and then the third game is when he got the season-ending
Uh,
injury. So yeah, scary.
wow.
Yeah, and I mean,
So
I think the ADP is appropriate. I do think it's worth like taking a shot on. I think it's a appropriate range because his upside, like I said, it really is a Lamar Jackson type of season. Jalen Hurts with Shane Steichen, it really is. He's a great runner. He's going to get you rushing touchdowns, and I think he's very underrated as a passer. I think he should just run way less, honestly, to stay healthy because I think he's super solid as a passer. He's got a rocket arm, one of the strongest arms in the league. And I would always high on him coming out of Florida. So really love Anthony Richardson. And like I said, this whole team is contingent on Anthony Richardson staying healthy and, tapping into that upside and potential. Jonathan Taylor next to him in the backfield. That backfield has the potential to be a game-breaking backfield with Shane Steichen calling it up. So I really love the potential of this team. You add A.D. Mitchell on the outside. Just envision him in there over Alec Pierce. I don't know why PFF has Pierce in there, but it will be A.D. Mitchell and Michael Pittman, like we said the day after the draft. That's a really fun duo on the outside. I could see a world where, eventually A.D. Mitchell becomes the wide receiver one in this offense because we both saw that type of upside in him as a prospect. I think he has like shades of CeeDee Lamb in the way that he moves, the way that he wins routes. He's really crafty in his intermediate route running. So I love that. Not to mention Josh Downs as a slot receiver. I think he's a really solid, reliable slot receiver. Anthony Richardson was targeting him a lot last year, 2 rookies last year. So I really do like this offense, not even to mention one of the top offensive lines, top 3, top 5 offensive line, 2 bookend tackles in Braden Smith and Bernard Ryman. And I mean, what a pick Ryman was out of Central Michigan. 7th graded tackle last year. That's just beautiful, beautiful stuff, really reaching that upside. And then you've got 3 really solid guys on the interior. You're not worried about the offensive line at all. That will really help Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, this is just, it's nothing like you look at. There's no Justin Jefferson. There's nothing that sexy in this offense. But man, it is solid. The line's solid. The receiver play is just going to be super solid with obviously Michael Pittman leading the whole. A.D. Mitchell was such a steal, such a good value in the second round. He fell. No one knows why. And I think he's going to put the NFL on blast for letting him fall 20 spots into the second round. But yeah, I mean, this is just super solid, and as good as Anthony Richardson is, and it's contingent on health, he can take this team. He can take them super far. I mean, they are legitimate playoff contenders with Anthony Richardson if he hits his upside.
Absolutely. And I do want to mention tight end. So something interesting, it came out today that the Colts were trying to trade up to pick 6 for Brock Bowers. And then after that, after they failed in doing so, they just didn't get a tight end the rest of the offseason. So Jelani Woods will be starting after, missing all of season last year due to injury. That's a little bit scary to me. That's interesting that you go from wanting to invest, a lot and trading up for Brock Bowers to just not going tight end at all. So I do think that's very interesting. They're really relying on Jelani Woods to stay healthy. I'm personally not the biggest Jelani Woods guy, but he's a freak athlete. He has the upside. So I don't know. That was interesting to me though.
Funny that when Brock Bowers fell past 10 that they didn't try and that's weird. You try and go to 6, it doesn't work out. He falls past 10 and then maybe they're like, oh, are we missing something? I don't
That's
know.
true. I didn't even think about that. Where'd he go?
He went
13.
13 to the Raiders. Or
That's
was it,
all.
wait, yeah, Raiders were 13 because Broncos were 12 and
Yeah.
Raiders were right after them. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I was very, very, very odd. When you try and trade up to 6 and he falls to 13, it's crazy that, you're that invested into him and then it just fell off. But I mean, they ultimately end up getting their pick of the first defensive player in the entire draft. Going into the defense with Laiatu Latu, and Dan, I'll let you take it away with him because I know you were his biggest fan.
yeah, like we were mock drafting Brock Bowers to the Colts because I mean, just imagine that offense with Bowers. That's just stupid stuff. But yeah, I was very high on Laiatu Latu. He was my #1 defensive player in the class. He ended up going as the #1 defensive player in the class, but it was all the way down at 15, which was surprising to me. I thought it'd be a little bit higher. I'm not really too worried about the injuries. It looks like the Colts, medical team wasn't worried about the injuries as well. So I really am confident that Laiatu Latu dominates. He's not on this graphic for some reason. We do have to get it out of the way. Samson Abukum goes down with a season-ending Achilles injury. Heartbreaking stuff. He was incredible last year. I think he had an 85 PFF grade last year. He was a star. So him and Latu, you would have been cooking with gas. But I do trust that Latu can be your quasi edge one. I really do because he had an incredibly high floor. He just has every pass rush move in the tool bag. He's literally every single move. He has cross chops, and no rookies ever have cross chops in his bag. He has it all. So I really do love him. You got Grover Stewart to be that really just space eating nose tackle. Great. One of the best run defenders in the NFL. Will go to nickel because That's okay. Latu's there for nickel, and then you got Pay, who will be pushed into that starting role opposite of Latu. They'll definitely both need to step up with the Abucum injury, and then you've got the goat, DeForest Buckner in the middle, just an absolute star coming off another great season. He's ageless. He's just completely balling. He's a great pass rusher as well. So he'll need to step up as well. They got to all just step up in place of Abucum. The secondary is a little bit more suspect to me. Kenny Moore is obviously a great shoe-in slot corner. I love Juju Brents, but as your CB1, outside CB1, that's a little bit scary. I love Jalen Jones as well, but as your starting CB2, it's just a little bit scary to me. I wish they would have. I mean, Stephon Gilmore is still a free agent. I don't know why you wouldn't bring back him. He was great for the Colts a few years ago. So, yeah, I don't know. I do worry a little bit about these outside corners. But, Nick Cross is really fun. Julian Blackmon's really fun. Rodney Thomas is a great safety 3. So it'll be a pretty good defense with Gus Bradley coaching them up.
Yeah, it's gonna be very entertaining. And I don't know what it is about the Colts defense, but they do have an knack for just turning the ball over. I mean, they're one of the highest rated turnover teams, I think, in the NFL over the past few seasons. And so, it's kind of funny. I mean, like it's guys like Julian Blackman and Nick Cross, just very underrated safeties, just solid players that are going to go out there and provide solid play. But yeah, you did hit the nail on the coffin. The weak spot is the outside corners. That's where you're going to get exposed. But again, you said there's still some good veteran corners on the market. Bring back a Stephon Gilmore. Go get somebody, to maybe play that, that corner one, CB2 outside, blanket. So you can free up the rest of your defense. But, in the inside with Quiddy Pay, DeForest Buckner, and Leatu Latu, I'm not worried about it. I mean, Ebukam going down, brutal, brutal, brutal. But, you got an edge rusher in round 1, and he's going to get a lot of playing time and prove why he's so polished and so good and so NFL ready. Because I mean, back to back 15 plus sack seasons from Latu Latu. I see it translating so clearly to the NFL for him, and I'm just not worried about it.
Yeah, he really was the most productive pass rusher in all of college football over the last 2 seasons. I mean, I just absolutely loved him. He was a top 10 player in the class for me as a blue chip prospect. Absolutely love Latu. I have no doubt that he's going to take advantage of this opportunity. And you mentioned that the Colts do force a lot of turnovers, and that is really because of this man in the middle, Ziggy Franklin, just an absolute beast. He's kind of like Darius Leonard in the way that he, finds the ball, he strips it, he'll get some picks. He's really solid, and EJ Speed had a really good season last year. So I do like that linebacker duo a lot. It'll help this defense for sure. With that, do you want to give your record prediction?
I will. Yeah, the Colts, I have them finishing second in the division with a 9-8 record, which is no slouch. Like I said, it's going to be very close. It's going to be a bloodbath. They were 1 game out of the playoffs last year. So it's gonna be fun, man. But yeah, I have them as the second best team in this division. Obviously, we'll get to number 1, but yeah, 9-8 record right now.
Ironically, I also have them at 9-8, a very
Same
respectable.
page.
We're on the same page for every single team so far. It's kind of weird. We've had like the same record prediction for almost every team in the series. But yeah, I mean, that's a really respectable record in the AFC. It's just a gauntlet. Their schedule is really hard. This division's really tough. So I do have them finishing 9-8 as well, but I have them finishing 3rd in the division. I think it will come down to the last week. I think they'll be right there in the playoff race, but I do have the next team we'll talk about finishing right above them. So yeah.
Who remind me, sorry, because I have such bad memory. The Colts lost. It was the Texans, right? They were facing the Texans last year, and there's the Gardner Minshew kind of behind the back pass, or it was low, and he had to just kind of scoot for it. But who was the running back? Who was the running back in that situation? Who was the one that dropped that pass? I'm sorry, it was the Texans, Colts. That was the play.
It wasn't Zach Moss or Taylor, was it? It was
No, it was a third string.
was it DJ Montgomery who was playing receiver at the time, or was it like Tyler
I feel like
Goodson
it was a
maybe?
running back. It was a running back, and it was reckless that they didn't have like. I remember we were pissed that they didn't have Jonathan Taylor in or something.
It might
But I
have been
remember,
Tyler Goodson.
oh yeah, it might have been Tyler Goodson. Is he still on the roster?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that it might have been Tyler Goodson because it was weird. I just remember like it was the running back coming out of the backfield. He might have done a kind of a little bit of a wheel route, but kind of cut to the outside, and Minshew underthrew him. And I'm pretty sure that's why Minshew did not get re-signed by the Colts.
That was heartbreaking. That was a heartbreaking end of the season. Yeah, that's pretty crazy though. They were down to the last game of the season with the Texans to make the playoffs without Anthony. So it says a lot about Steichen and this team.
Yes, it does. They're a relentless team. They're a well-coached team. They're a well-oiled machine. And yeah, I think they're going to be battling out with the Texans, and it's gonna be fun. Ant versus CJ Stroud. You know, it's very fun with those two young quarterbacks going into their second year.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, we'll go on to the next team. I think they're going to be battling it out with the Jaguars as well, who finished with the same record as the Colts last year at 9-8. They just barely missed the playoffs because of the just insane collapse at the end of the season, just finishing 1-5 to end the season. It's pretty depressing. We won't even talk about 2023 because it was a incredible collapse, honestly.
Wasn't it like I say, okay, again, sorry, random tangent, but weren't they like at one point like 98.3% playoff locks going into like week 12?
Yeah, I think they were like 6-1 to start the season or something. It was incredible, historic collapse, legit.
It was crazy. It's like what they did to the Chargers in the playoffs, they did over the last 6 games of the season. So I mean, but yeah, no, if I remember, it was like a 99.1% chance of making the playoffs with like 6 or 7 weeks to go, and they just made the impossible happen.
Yeah, it was a literal historic collapse. So we'll stop talking about 2023 Jaguars fans. Don't click off just yet. We'll go on to 2024. We'll talk about the offseason. First of all, you bring in one of your own and Josh Hines Allen. Going to take some getting used to. Josh Hines Allen, one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. He was a top 3 free agent in the entire class. So really important that you did bring him back. He would have been a great signing if he left. So really important bringing him in. And they also bring in Eric Armstead, who's coming off a great season for the Niners. He gets cut in a very surprise cut, and you bring him in, and I think that's going to be an awesome little duo on the defensive line there. So I do really like that addition. You throw a bag at Ezra Cleveland, who came over last year, and he's a serviceable guard, nothing crazy, but it's nice to have that piece in there. You bring in Darnell Savage to be the slot corner, who was a really solid slot corner at the end of the season for the Packers last year. So I do like that. I do. I like a lot of slot corners on this team that we'll talk about here in a second. You bring in Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. Gabe Davis is the poster boy for inconsistency. One game he looks like prime Randy Moss, and then the next game he'll drop a goose egg and get 0 catches. He's very inconsistent. That's what's been holding him back. The Bills didn't really care to let him go for sure. But you bring in Brian Thomas, and I absolutely loved him. I thought that he was easily their best pick of the draft, and he's going to have a great connection with Trevor Lawrence, just a perfect type of receiver, a deep threat for Lawrence. I'm really excited for that. You bring in Mitch Morse as well to be a starting center next to Cleveland. So I do like the offseason, pretty solid. Your only loss is really just Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones, two receivers who weren't too electric last year, didn't have a great connection with Trevor, and then you do lose Darius Williams, but you bring in Ronald Darby for him.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting offseason, and yeah, some questionable things. Like I'm not the biggest Gabe Davis fan, but I feel like his skill set could be very interesting to pair with a Trevor Lawrence. Um, Bringing back obviously Josh Hines Allen, who apparently lost his name to the other Josh Allen in the division,
He
or
got
sorry,
boxed
not the
out.
division, in the
Conference.
conference in the AFC. But yeah, definitely an interesting offseason. I do like Darnell Savage. But like you said, the draft pick, Brian Thomas Jr. is probably the most exciting thing. I'm very excited to see him and Trevor Lawrence paired up this year. That should be pretty fun. And then yeah, obviously Calvin Ridley, Trey Herndon. Didn't feel like it was much of a loss. Felt like we kind of replaced what we lost and added more.
Absolutely. And with that, let's go on to the lineup portion. Let's talk about the starting lineup and the offense for the Jaguars. And let's just start it off in the backfield. Let's start it off at the
Wait,
quarterback.
sorry, gotta pause the podcast real quick. We didn't even talk about them adding Mac Jones. That might be the most important offseason signing of all time.
Yeah. Well, you,
You
I'm
bring in Mac
speechless.
Jones for some much needed quarterback competition to just put a little scare under Trevor Lawrence's, under his hair. So Mac Jones is sniffing at that starting spot. We'll see. But How disrespectful.
Yeah, how could we possibly forget? You want to know something funny? If I'm being completely honest, when you said his name, it wasn't clicking on who Mac Jones was. I was like trying to think of who Mac Jones was. I've completely erased him from my memory. That it was such a bad season last year.
Oh, it was brutal. But yeah, I mean, very disrespectful of us. Sorry, Jaguars fans, for not mentioning the GOAT who likes to rap in Jacksonville and feels free of New England. Shout out Mac Jones.
Yeah, best backup quarterback in the NFL. That's what he always was, really. Even coming into the draft, it was pretty obvious that he was a backup quarterback. But let's talk about the starter here because I have a take with Trevor Lawrence. I do think he's the most underrated player in the entire NFL right now, just compared to fan discourse. People are really low on him, it seems, especially when you look at Twitter, anyone really talking about Trevor Lawrence because of that collapse at the end of the season. People are low on him, but I just think he's such a talented quarterback. He had so many missed opportunities and chances last year with Calvin Ridley dropping so much touchdowns, Zay Jones dropping a bunch. It was just really bad connection with those receivers last year. But I'm confident that Trevor Lawrence will, make his way back up to being a top 10 quarterback. I think physically he's easily a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. So I'm really optimistic for Trevor going into the season. I think he has a pretty fun group of weapons. We'll start it off with Christian Kirk first. I do think he's the wide receiver one in this offense. Keep that in mind for fantasy football as well. I think Christian Kirk is going to be a pretty good value, and we'll go to Evan Ingram next because I think he's kind of the wide receiver two in this offense. The offense really runs through Kirk, Ingram, and ETN. Who ETN I'm taking in the second round of fantasy drafts. I think he's going to have an awesome season. I think he's one of the most underrated running backs in the NFL. He's just a stud, right around a top 10 running back. Gabe Davis on the outside, a little bit more scary, but I'm very optimistic about Brian Thomas Jr. I think he really clicks with Trevor Lawrence. I just have a feeling that he has a special connection with him. I don't know how early it will be, but I do think that they just complement each other so well in their play styles and the touchdowns that were being dropped in the end zone last year for Lawrence. I think Brian Thomas will come down with them. He had 17 touchdowns last year. He was a complete touchdown machine. So I'm very optimistic for that duo. I'm really excited for that boom. And then you kind of just take what you can get with Gabe Davis, honestly, on the outside. Hopefully he has a few boom weeks. And then, yeah, like I said, Kirk, Ingram, and ETN are what this offense will run through. Doug Peterson's not really the greatest. He's a really good pass play caller. He's really good in the passing game, but he's a pretty terrible run game play caller. He's really bad at calling plays in the run game. So I do worry about ETN for that reason because that will hold them back ultimately. The offensive line, I think Anton Harrison, I'll just say it right now, is one of the most underrated players in the NFL. He didn't have a great PFF grade last year, but I just love his pass protection. He's already a rock in pass protection. He locked down Will Anderson last year at the end of the year, watching these games back in preparation for this. He really just completely locked down Will Anderson. So I love Anton Harrison. He's one of my favorite prospects last year in the draft, opposite of Cam Robinson. I think that's pretty solid. You got Ezra Cleveland, Mitch Morrison, Brandon Scherf, who actually had a pretty good season last year as well. You got a set offensive line, set five, and I think it's pretty fun and solid. So I do like this offense, and I'm more optimistic than most. I think that they'll kind of click this year.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so funny. I feel like, you say Trevor Lawrence is, one of the most underrated, players at his position. Evan Ingram, quietly tight end too in fantasy, an absolute stud. I mean, what he was doing at the end of the season was kind of ridiculous. And so, another fantasy shout out, Evan Ingram is probably going to be an absolute steal. He finished as the tight end too, and he finished the last, I believe, 5 games with 10 or more points and almost 10 or more targets in every single game. So look out for Evan Ingram because he's becoming quite the lethal pass catcher. But yeah, I mean it's just a solid offense. Brian Thomas Jr., like you said, 17 touchdowns, a little bit undershadowed by Malik Neighbors, but I mean this dude is 6'4", runs a 4.3, and is a red zone threat. So Trevor Lawrence is going to have the weapons. He's going to have the ability. I mean, it should be a better season. I think we're going to see definitely an uptick, and I think people will get back on the Trevor Lawrence hype come 2024 2025 season.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just really high on the player. I think he's just so talented. I think he's really smart. And with that, let's just go on to the defense. I really am excited to talk about this front seven. I think it's one of the more exciting front sevens in the NFL, but it's very polarizing because you've got first overall pick Trayvon Walker, who hasn't really shown that he's worthy of being a first overall pick, if I'm being honest, at all ever. He's been a struggle. So, and I think that was kind of, predicted by everyone that after he was the first overall pick, everyone reacted the same. Everyone was calling Balky crazy for that. Pretty obvious to go Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, really anyone.
Aiden
Aiden
Hutchinson
Hutchinson,
would have definitely been the better pick there.
Kayvon Thibodeau, who hasn't even been good, but he's still been way better than Trayvon Walker. I mean, just really anyone. It was rough, but you're really banking on him hitting that upside because if he does, you've got Josh Hines Allen, a top 10 edge rusher opposite of him, coming off a great, fantastic season. You got Eric Armstead coming off a great season for the 49ers, Roy Robertson Harris. I really love that front four, that defensive line. If Trayvon Walker has any semblance of a good season, if he hits that upside, if he really hits the upside, then there'll be like the best defensive line because he does have a lot of upside. That's why he went first overall because he's a crazy athlete. But going on to the linebackers in the front seven, Devin Lloyd, Foya Aluakun, both great seasons last year. Devin Lloyd really took a big stride up in his second year in the NFL. I absolutely love this linebacking core. Aluakun so good is in coverage. He's just really good in coverage, and Lloyd's kind of good at everything else, and he's smart in coverage. So I love the linebacker duo, one of my favorite in the NFL. And then the secondary is what I'm really, really optimistic about. Tyson Campbell's a star corner, in my opinion. He's coming off two really good seasons now. He just got the bag. You do have Darnell Savage as a slot corner. The graphics a little bit wrong on this. You got to switch Darnell Savage and Antonio Johnson because Antonio Johnson will be moving to safety where he played at Texas A&M and where he played awesome. Honestly, I think he's going to be a really good, strong safety, even better than he was last year as a nickel. And then, like I said, Darnell Savage ended the season for the Packers pretty solid as a slot corner. So I'm a little bit optimistic, honestly, about him being the slot corner next to Tyson Campbell. And Ronald Darby, who is scary. He's definitely not reliable, but he's coming off a good season with the Ravens. I'll be honest. Mike McDonald coached him up pretty well, and he's coming off a good season. So if he can stay healthy and keep that momentum, I do really love this secondary with the Cisco as well. There's a lot of safeties. Jerry Jones, who I absolutely loved. He was like my favorite slot corner in the class. So one of these guys goes down, I think Jerry Jones can play safety or slot corner, just like Savage and Antonio Johnson. I really love that. You've got Andrew Wingard as well, who's been really just reliable as a backup safety. Terrell Edmonds as well, underrated signing. So I really do like this defense. I think it's a little bit slept on. I think Josh Allen, Tyson Campbell, Devin Lloyd could really hit their potential and make this team a playoff team.
100%, yeah, and I mean the depth is very good. I mean, we even drafted Mason Smith out of LSU, who definitely a Trent Baalke type prospect. A lot of upside there, very high recruit. But yeah, I mean Josh Proctor out of Ohio State, I really liked. He's a guy that ended up going undrafted, I believe, or in the 6th or 7th round. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys. Devin Lloyd, me and you are very familiar with out of Utah, freaky athlete. Just an incredible player. But as you go through the depth on this team, it's solid. It's a well built team. And yeah, I was gonna say Jerry Jones are one of our favorite corners out of Florida State. Is added this team. It's there's a lot of upside and another team that forces a lot of turnovers. The Jaguars land on the ball more than not. So I'm very, very excited to see the upside of this defense. Andre Cisco was one of my favorite prospects coming out of the draft. He's turned into something just pretty special, and I feel like he still has an even higher ceiling to hit. But yeah, very, very polarizing, very young, upcoming, exciting defense that I'm very excited to watch this year. And throwing this out there from a fantasy standpoint, I feel like the Jaguars defense could be sneakily good on a week-to-week basis, depending on who they're playing.
That's true. This team will create some turnovers with Lloyd, Aluakun, Josh Allen, Tyson Campbell, who had a lot of turnovers last year. That's a good point. That definitely will be a slept-on one that most people won't be eyeing. So still the Jaguars defense. And I like you mentioning the depth, like Devon Hamilton, really good run defender, nose tackle. But Mason Smith, we both liked him as a prospect. Didn't think he'd go round 2. I liked him as a prospect closer to like round 4 or 3. But he's going to play a lot, so I guess that will be fun. He was a fun pass rusher. I do want to say Jordan Jefferson in the 4th round, he was an undraftable prospect to me. I thought he was an undrafted free agent. He went to the Senior Bowl. He was by far the worst player there. He embarrassed himself. He got in a fight with Christian Haynes, he threw his helmet because he was frustrated that he was just getting wrecked the whole week. I mean, he was bad. I don't know what the Jaguars saw to make him a 4th-round pick, but yeah, I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, it's definitely a Trent Baalke type of draft, we're just they very, very bank on upside, in that scouting room, and if these players like, like Mason Smith, like a Travon Walker, they hit their upside. I mean, it could be very scary.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like you said, for if you get this team as your fantasy defense, there's some hidden potential and upside there. If Trayvon Walker hits that upside, he'd wreak some havoc, and create some turnover. So there is some upside with this team. I really like the defense. Chad Muma as LB3, one of the best LB3s in the NFL. With that, you want to give your record prediction?
Yeah, it's gonna be 9-8, the same as the Colts, but I do have them just outside. I feel like the Colts will get the better of them, and they will finish third in the division. So just right behind the Colts, but again, very, very sneaky upside, a very competitive team, and a team that's just and that's kind of where I have the Colts and the Jaguars. I'll just say I have them in that wild, they're in that wild card spot for me right now in the AFC. And I feel like on a week to week basis, you're going to see one team popping in, one team popping out. So I just feel like they're that team that's going to be fighting for a wild card spot all year.
Yeah, between the Colts and Jaguars, it's definitely going to come down to the last game of the season. I have the Jaguars finishing second in the division with a 10-7 record. So I have them just one game ahead of the Colts. It will come down to that last game of the season like it did last year. But I am high on this Jaguars team. I'm just really high on Trevor Lawrence. I love him as a quarterback. I think Travis Etienne is one of the most underrated running backs. He really proved us wrong. We wanted him to show us more. And last season, he just really played great. He was a great receiver, great rusher of the football too. So I really just love this team. Like we just went over the defense. It's a really exciting defense, honestly. I think no one's really talking about how solid and deep it is. So I do have them with a 10-7 record, sneaking into the wild card and finishing second in this great division. Vegas has them tied with the Colts with an 8.5 over under. So I do think I might be betting some money on this team hitting the over. I think 8.5 is a little bit too low, and I am pretty high on this team as long as Trevor Lawrence, you know, plays like he should, and Doug Peterson, doesn't shit the bed like he did at the end of the season last year with that historic collapse. I am pretty optimistic for this team.
Yeah, which is very respectable, and it's gonna be close, man. It's just gonna be within a game or two. That's what this division is just it's gonna come down to one stupid loss for one of these teams. It's gonna be their ultimate downfall.
Absolutely. And with that, good transition to our last team that we'll talk about here. One of the most exciting teams that we'll talk about this whole series, the Houston Texans. Just a great revelation season last year and CJ Stroud's rookie year. We both were trying to be higher than anyone on this team in the deep dive last year. We were hyping this team up, saying how D'Amico Ryans and CJ Stroud would really elevate this team. We knew they'd be a tough out for everyone. I don't think even we predicted how insane they would be 10-7, with the playoff win, just really having one of the more exciting young team seasons that we've really seen ever. So, really fun discussion here with the Texans. Really excited to talk about CJ Stroud's team going into their offseason. I would say they got frighteningly better. Like this team it was good last year, and now they are just loading up with good veterans, some superstar talent as well. Really excited to talk about this team. We'll start it off with their additions. They bring in Stephon Diggs, who's not coming off the best season with the Bills, but I do think is a compliment to Nico Collins and Tank Dell with CJ Stroud throwing you the football. I think Stephon Diggs is just going to be a great intermediate receiver for this team, really reliable in the intermediate game for CJ Stroud. I'm really, really optimistic for him. You bring in Joe Mixon, because why not? Why not upgrade on the Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce backfield? Why not when this team is really just trying to compete right now? I don't think Joe Mixon was really good at all last year either, similarly to Diggs, but why not? This team is so loaded. You've got so many offensive weapons in this team that they're all just going to complement and help each other. Why not? You bring in Daniil Hunter, a top 10 free agent in this whole class for us. We had him in our top 10 free agent episode. I mean, just crazy to think that you have him opposite of Will Anderson being coached up by D'Amico Ryan, just superstar stuff. Really exciting. You bring in Aziz Al-Shaair to be honestly a star linebacker for D'Amico Ryans. He was awesome last year, and Danico Autry from the Titans. Both of them interdivision. Danico Autry does have a 6-game suspension, so that will kind of hurt you at the beginning of the season because you do lose Sheldon Rankins. But I just think these additions are so electric, and they totally outweigh the losses of Jonathan Grenard, Sheldon Rankins, and Blake Cashman. It's just awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, Jeff Okuda is just something I personally love for this defense. I mean, just talk about a guy, went top 5 in the NFL draft. I think he was the 3rd overall pick to the Lions, if I'm not mistaken. And just an incredible talent, just an incredible talent who just hasn't hit his upside yet. And I think under D'Amico Ryans, he's just really gonna thrive. But yeah, Danielle Hunter, probably one of the biggest ones, the most exciting ones. I mean, this guy is just a sack machine. He's 29. He's not slowing down anytime soon. He's going to be a force on that defense for the next coming years. And like you said, why not? Why not add some veterans to this team for CJ Stroud? I didn't love the running backs last year. I feel like Joe Mixon is a smart football player. I feel like he can kind of do everything okay. I don't feel like he's incredible at this stage of his career at anything, but I feel like he's going to be a little bit more productive than the running backs they had last year. So I like that. And I mean, you got one of the most stacked wide receiver cores in the NFL. Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Robert Woods, Noah Brown, John Mechie, the third, Ben Skoranek, just because why not? But it's an absolutely lethal wide receiver core, and it's just kind of like the rich get richer, you know, and just I'll just point out from the tight end side of things. I mean, Dalton Schultz, Brevin Jordan, draft Cade Stover. It's just this whole team and this whole roster is built out so deep and good. And sorry, I just kind of transitioned right into the roster immediately, but I mean, we're just talking about there's just I don't really see a weak spot on this team. I love the starting 5. I mean, Juice Scruggs and have the best PFF grade. I think he's a lot better player than what that grade shows. Titus Howard at right tackle. Very excited to pair him on the other side of Laramie Tunzel. Kenyon Green, another former first overall pick. You got Shaq Mason, who I'm very excited for. So, I mean, I think the front 5 is perfect. You got depth behind them. Blake Fisher, who they drafted from Notre Dame, who I'm very polarized and excited for. He's actually a starter over Joe Alt until Joe Alt got there. He's going to be the left tackle, and it ended up flip flopping. But it's just a case for me on this offense and this whole team where the rich got richer this offseason. And this is like you said, in the intro, we were higher than anyone, and we physically said that we are higher than anyone on the Houston Texans. That is our crush last year, and I see no reason to be higher on them than anyone again this year.
Yeah, we wanted to die on that Texans hill, and we really did. We were high on them the whole season, the whole preseason. It was really fun being high on this team, and we're gonna do it again because you've got this superstar CJ Stroud. I said it at the end of the season last year. I personally truly believe he was the MVP of the NFL last year. I think he was more valuable than any player in the NFL. He definitely had better stats than Lamar Jackson in really every single way, and he missed a few games. I think CJ Stroud was the most valuable player in the NFL as a rookie. Obviously, won Rookie of the Year over a legendary Puka Nacua season, so no slouch there. But I think he takes another step up, and he just becomes, a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I see him as a top 3, top 5 quarterback in the NFL, right there with the Joe Burrows of the world. So I really am just optimistic, and we'll get in. You already kind of laid out the depth and the great offensive line, but this receiving core, man, I think it's by far the best receiving core in the NFL. I think it's the best receiver trio in the NFL. It's so complimentary as well. You've got Nico Collins, who has the 3rd highest receiver in PFF last year. He just had a great breakout revelation season with CJ Stroud. That Ohio State to Michigan connection was super fun. Stephon Diggs will be a fun compliment because he won't need to be that wide receiver 1 anymore. He'll just kind of be an intermediate receiver, which he was still good at the end of the year last year for the Bills. He was good in the intermediate game, close to the line of scrimmage, really reliable for CJ Stroud. So I really love that. Not to mention Tank Dell, electric deep threat coming out of the slot, just so fun. He's a gadget player. He can do really anything. Put him in the backfield. He can run any type of route. I just think it's the most complimentary, fun, exciting, perfect wide receiver trio in the NFL. You mentioned bringing in Cade Stover, CJ Stroud's college teammate. He's pretty much a Dalton Schultz clone. Dalton Schultz is really awesome last year, really reliable like safety blanket for Stroud. And then you bring in Mixon because why not? He's an upgrade. He was terrible last year. He was the 33rd graded running back in the NFL. He just didn't look himself. He really fell off a cliff physically, but he is a touchdown machine. He always will be in this offense. They're always going to be around the goal line. He's going to fall into the end zone a lot. So I'm still not like fading him in fantasy at all. I think he'll be a good option in fantasy. Nico Collins should definitely be the first receiver you take in fantasy. And I just think it's going to be so fun, man. This offense is just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I love the starting five, and then Larry Tunsil is a superstar as well. So a lot of superstar power in this offense.
Yeah, and like from a fantasy aspect, like I'm almost a little scared of the Texans just because of how loaded they are. But at the same time, I trust CJ Stroud. I mean, I trust him to be, kind of like, what year was it the Broncos had that incredible
I was
Aaron
just about to
Hector?
say that same thing because, like, it is scary usually with good offenses in fantasy, like really good offenses. But that Broncos offense was so productive that everyone was pretty much good. That was 2013 with Demarius, Julius Thomas, Welker, Decker. They were honestly, no Sean Marino. They were all good in fantasy. And I think
Yeah.
that's funny because I was having the same exact thought as you before you say it, that this offense could be the exact same and just be the number one offense in the NFL, one of the best offenses we ever see. This could be legendary stuff.
Yeah, it feels like a 5,500 yard and 50 touchdown type of season for CJ Stroud incoming. So just, just draft him. He's gonna smash whatever lines he's on because I mean they're gonna be scoring a lot and this offense is gonna be high powered and it's just almost gonna be impossible to stop him because you're doubling, Diggs, you got Nico and Dell in the slot with Schultz. And then, if you're doubling Nico, you got Diggs, who can burn you deep and Dell over the middle. So it's just, and CJ Stroud, um, just one of the coolest, I mean, just didn't feel like a rookie. Didn't, I mean, it was not a rookie season. It felt like this guy was a 5 to 10 year NFL vet. I mean, just his collectiveness, his mentality, from what I watch and, YouTube on the Texans and all that stuff, and what the coaches say, he doesn't, he preps like, like a Tom Brady, like a Peyton Manning. He's just, the dude never goes to sleep. His offensive coordinator, who I just blank who they re-signed this offseason.
Bobby Slowick, who should be a head
Bobby,
coach.
yeah, yep. If you saw that, he's like CJ's just he won't stop texting me, man, all night. What if we do this? What if we change this in this coverage? He's like he preps like the Tom Brady that he doesn't sleep. He's that kind of guy, and he goes, it's just awfully similar to the greats in the NFL, and so. There's no worry about CJ Stroud just having a 1 year wonder. He's going to be something special. He is something special already, and I think he's going to do something incredible this year to, what we don't even expect.
Yep, top five quarterback in the NFL already, a lock in my opinion, not even a discussion. And I think it's really fun what you brought up. This team in fantasy, just take whatever Texans you can, because you just want a piece of this Texans pie. You just want some type of semblance of Texans in your fantasy teams because they're gonna have these crazy, crazy boom weeks. But with that, let's go on to their defense. Another really exciting discussion because D'Amico Ryans, their head coach, is one of the best defensive coaches in the NFL. He's going to coach all of these guys up to really hit their potential. Started off with the defensive line. You've got Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter coming off a great season, and somehow Will Anderson was higher graded in PFF than him as a rookie. So, I mean, this edge rusher is just stupid, stupid good, stupid fun. You lose Sheldon Rankins, so the interior isn't as fun. You kind of just got some, journeymen in there in the interior, and Fadakasi and Danico Autry and Mario Edwards. But we'll go on to the secondary because we called our shot on Kamari Lassiter to the Texans. We did a 7-round mock draft for each team. And we straight up said Kamari Lassiter was D'Amico Ryan's perfect corner. And what do you know? He was their first pick of this draft. Just the perfect D'Amico Ryan's corner. He's going to be so fun starting on the outside with Derek Stingley. Lassiter is just such like a dog. He's just so physical. He's going to trash talk. He's going to get in receivers' heads. I have no doubt he's going to be a star as a rookie, kind of like Devon Witherspoon. I think Derek Stingley, you see he was the 9th graded corner in the NFL last year. I think he's going to be a star with Lassiter. Opposite of him, you got a really good veteran in Desmond King and Miles Bryant, honestly, in the slot. Some really good options in that secondary. You got Jimmy Ward, Jalen Petrie, who was a fun pick in the safety room. I just really, really love this team. Not to mention Aziz Al-Shaair, who they bring over. I think he's going to be a star linebacker with D'Amico Ryans coaching him up, and Christian Harris coming out of Alabama, really good athlete. I think he has all the upside in the world. This defense could just break the league. And speaking of fantasy defenses, I would take the Texans because they could definitely get a lot of takeaways.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, you go back to the safeties of Jimmy Ward and Jalen Petrie, and you add Kalen Bullock this year. It's just like I said, they're a well-oiled machine, and the rich get richer in this situation. I mean, they're solid, they're deep. Derek Stingley has just turned into a top 10 corner in the NFL. He's incredible. Desmond King, one of the most underrated slot corners slash special teams players for a long time, and the dude just plays at this vet minimum price, and he goes out there and he's good at creating turnovers. He's a solid tackler. He's good on special teams. Just a guy who I'm very, very fond of. Aziz Al-Shaair, that's a fun addition with Christian Harris right in the middle. Two guys that are game wreckers and just downhill freaks and are just incredible football players. D'Amico Ryans knows what he wants at linebackers. Those two are going to be a problem. So, the two edge rushers and Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. is just lethal coming off the side. So, just a well-oiled machine, man. Just brilliant stuff by D'Amico Ryan's, brilliant stuff by the GM. It's just a well-built team, and they're going to be scary. I'm going to be higher on them again. I'm going to be high on them. I think they're playoff locks. I think they're dark horse Super Bowl contenders this year. And I don't think any team wants to play them.
Yeah, if they catch fire at the end of the season, it's over. They really could have that Super Bowl upside with just this crazy roster. Like the starting lineups is beautiful. The backups on the defensive line, their depth on the defensive line. Tim Settle, great defensive lineman. Derek Barnett, Jerry Hughes, really good rotational veteran edge pieces. Kalen Bullock, I really loved coming out of USC, was one of my top safeties in the class. Was really rangy, really good in coverage. He has a lot of potential. So being your third safety, I absolutely love that. And then Miles Bryant and Jeff Okuda, just so much upside with the veteran backups. It's just crazy, crazy stuff. This team is just so fun. Derek Stingley and Lassiter has potential to be a great cornerback duo. I think it has the upside to be like one of the best cornerback duos in the NFL one day. So I'm really, really bullish on this Texans team as well. We both will be a lot higher on them this whole season than anyone. With that, do you want to give your record prediction for the team?
Yes, sir. I have an 11-6 record with finishing first in the AFC South. And, I wouldn't even be surprised if they got more wins than that. And this team is a playoff lock. I think they own this division. I think the other three teams are going to struggle to keep up with these guys. I think the star power is too hard to keep up with. I mean, the receivers are going to be almost impossible. They're going to take over games. CJ Stroud is going to take over games, and they're just built to last. They're built through injury. They're built through adversity. And you got one of the coolest quarterbacks in the NFL back there, who is just going to prove why there's no question that he's a top 5 quarterback this year.
And I'm copying your record prediction as well. I have 11-6 finishing first in the division as well, but it feels a little bit like rude almost. I feel like it's almost rude to the Texans saying 11-6, but I think 12-5,
It's like we should.
13.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have them at 11-6, but I almost do feel rude. I feel like it should have been more like a 12-5.
Yeah, the thing is, their schedule is a gauntlet. So, like, 11 wins is pretty respectable when you look at their schedule. I almost ranked them at their floor. I was just being conservative with, going through their schedule. I do think 11-6 is around their floor, and their Vegas over under right now for win total is 9.5 wins. I'm smashing that over because I think 11-10 is their floor. So I'm smashing the over on Texans win total right now. I think it's just a steal. You're just printing money at that point. I think they're a lock for 10 wins, and they're just going to be a playoff team. And if they catch fire at the end of the season with all these star power, if they stay healthy with these superstars, I think they really could make a Super Bowl push with the Chiefs. And I think they could be the Bengals, because Joe Burrow is kind of the Chiefs, the only guy that could beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. I think CJ Stroud could be a better version of Joe Burrow, which sounds crazy.
I I 100% agree. I was gonna say it's just this dark horse candidate that can knock off, the evil empire, which is the Chiefs, And I have full faith in CJ Stroud. I think he is the man to defeat evil. I think he can do it.
He might just be that plant, the industry plant to finally come in and defeat the Sith Chiefs. But with that, let's go to the moment that everyone's been waiting for. Let's go to our AFC South award ceremony. Tell me who you think will be the offensive MVP in this division if we haven't talked about him enough already.
Yeah, it's just a great transition into talking a little bit more about our king CJ Stroud. I'm trying to think of more good Star Wars analogies, but he's our Rey going to fight Kylo Ren. For the newer young age Star Wars people, he is our Rey. He is our savior. He's gonna be the man to knock off anyone, and he's the obvious choice. He's one of the best rookie quarterbacks we've ever seen. And I almost expect him just to be even better and even greater than what he was last year. And there's no reason he can't with the team just getting better around him.
Yeah, missed opportunity on me not putting a lightsaber in his hand right there. That's a perfect picture to have a lightsaber for. It would have looked dope. But I totally agree. I have CJ Stroud. You have to put CJ Stroud as your offensive MVP for really the NFL. I think I'm putting some money on him winning the league MVP because he really, like I said, should have won the league MVP last year. I think he was the most valuable player in the entire NFL. He had 4,100 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions with 100 passing rating as a rookie. It was just incredible stuff. And he missed some games, and that was still better stats than Lamar Jackson, I will say. So yeah, just incredible player. We've talked enough about CJ Stroud this episode. He is our king. He is our guy. He's gonna be the guy to defeat Patrick Mahomes one day. Give me your defensive MVP for the division.
I'm gonna go with one of my favorite players in all the NFL in this division. It is Mr. Jeffrey Simmons. He is just a bad man. And in my opinion, he's one of the most underrated defensive players in all the NFL. What he does, from a pass rushing standpoint to a run defending standpoint, he's just one of the best to do it. And I think he could be a guy. He didn't have the kind of Aaron Donald 20 plus sack seasons last year. But I could see Jeffrey Simmons, with this new revamped team with a Trevondre Sweat next to him, just being freed up a lot and being a 10 plus sack guy from the interior. So I'm going to be very bullish. I'm going to be very high on Jeffrey Simmons, but this is a bad man. And I think he needs some respect on his name.
Yeah, I like it. He's kind of been an NFL secret favorite. We hype him up in every game preview for the Titans. He's always just a game wrecker. So I absolutely love that pick. I have similar thinking. You like him because they bring in Tefondre Sweat. I'm going to go with Josh Hines Allen. They bring in Eric Armstead next to him. I think that's just a superstar, scary defensive line. You can't really double team either of them because they will make you pay as a pass rusher. He just barely got the complete bag as well. So I'm very optimistic that this Jaguars defense will be really solid. They'll exceed expectations. I think they also bring in a really solid defensive mind. We didn't even talk about that for the Jaguars, but they bring in Nielsen, who had a great season last year coaching up the Falcons defense, who really impressed. It really was way better than they should have been. So I think the Jaguars defense impresses. I think Josh Allen just has a complete breakout season. He was a top 10 edge last year on PFF and really any metric. And I think he has a top 5 edge season, and he really just hits that next stride. So I love both these players.
Absolutely love that from Josh Hines Allen, which I will never get used to saying. But it is Josh Hines Allen, a guy who could put up 20 sacks any given season. It's a good pick. These are two mean football players right here.
All right, give me your rookie of the year for the AFC South.
I'm gonna go, with the guy who, he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. As we said, he was an absolute steal for the Colts, but he fell. He fell probably a little too late. But it's gonna be AD Mitchell, and I really like the way he complements, an Anthony Richardson. I like his play style. I like his aggressive, tendency to just pluck the ball out of the air. I think he can run every route, and I think he's going to be a problem. I think, he can ultimately be the X receiver and, take that from a Michael Pittman, who I feel like is, maybe better slotted as a Z, Y. You can kind of move him around. But I think AD Mitchell will be this team's future. I think he is, one of the freakiest athletes that came out of the NFL draft. and I see no reason he can't be an immediate contributor and win this title.
Yeah, and I've got similar thinking. I love AD Mitchell. The Colts just had an incredible draft. Like I said at the top, they had two insane steals at the top of their draft in the first two rounds. And I couldn't believe they got Latu at pick 15. He was my number one player in the entire, or my number one defensive player in the draft. And with sadly Samson Ebukam going down to injury, I think Latu just completely wrecks havoc as a starting edge. I think he's got such a high floor with his exponential bag of pass rush moves. I'm really optimistic for him. He's, the most productive edge rusher in all of college football over the last two seasons. I think he just really has a great revelation rookie season. Could win defensive rookie of the year. Could have that Will Anderson type of season. So I absolutely loved him. I will say I had to change this graphic when Buckham went down with injury because I was originally going to go with Kamari Lassiter. So I do want to shout out Kamari Lassiter because I think he's going to be a star corner as a rookie, like Devon Witherspoon vibes. So do want to shout him out. Want to shout out Brian Thomas Jr. as well. I think he's going to have a great connection with Trevor Lawrence. But yeah, I do think that Latu, now that Buckham sadly goes down to injury, will just have a revelation starting edge season and be one of the most productive rookie edges we've seen in a while. So love that. Do you want to go on to your division winner for anyone that's been skipping around?
For those who just fast forwarded all the way to the very end just to see who it is the Houston Texans for both of us, and for good reason. I think this is clearly the best roster in the AFC South. I don't think many can argue that. I think they got one of the most up and coming, exciting coaches in the NFL with D'Amico Ryans. Just Bobby Slowick returning. It's just a very bright football organization with our leader, our Jedi master, our Luke Skywalker, right here, just this is our savior. This is the guy that we believe can take down the evil empire. And he's gonna do it. He's going to do it. My bold take is he will knock off the Chiefs in the playoffs. So for those of you who are waiting for my Seeker's hot take at the end, give me CJ Stroud to knock Patrick Mahomes out of the playoffs. That's my bold take. That is my bold prediction.
All right, finishing hot with a nice exit hot take here. CJ Stroud, our king of the NFL seekers. He has been since the draft last year. Absolutely love this man. He will be the guy to take down Patrick Mahomes. I agree. Eventually, if not this year, it will be very soon that he will, reach a Super Bowl. He's just that team just has so many superstars. That roster is just too loaded. The AFC South is really good, but the Texans are just above. It's just kind of silly how good that team is. D'Amico Ryans is such a good coach. But yeah, really fun talking about the AFC South. So many fun, young, polarizing teams. Look at these four young, polarizing quarterbacks. Just really fun discussion. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the AFC South deep dive. We'll have NFC South next. Anything else you want to say, Stores?
Just want to shout out James Joseph 5707 for being the first comment on the last podcast, for commenting the AFC South. That's why we did it. Want to shout out one of our other loyal listeners in Jake Tay 731, absolute go, always commenting, always tuning in. So just want to share some love with the loyal listeners. We see you guys. We appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you show us love, we'll take any suggestions you give. Thanks for the suggestion for the AFC South. It was a super fun division to talk about. And yeah, thank you, Jake, for always supporting. He's our by far our most loyal subscriber. So absolutely love to see it. But with that being said, like, comment, subscribe for the algorithm. Tell us who you want to see next. And peace out.
Peace.